Long time no see, buddy.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks, hasn't it?
How you doing?
Been quite a while. Yes, busy.
Oh, good.
It's all
Me
getting
too.
really busy. Yeah. So back at work, really sort of more into the, no, there's pretty much no restrictions anymore. So it's all business as usual. And so getting out to site and all that sort of thing, and things ramping up now that we can do stuff, and keeps us all busy.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah,
I've been following your videos, your conversation on the bike. So it's been good. So obviously you're getting out and keeping fit.
yeah. It's rambling on the video. I'm going to switch over to doing an audio book pretty soon. But yeah, it's interesting. I noticed on your video you said you'd like to have a conversation with Daniel Schmachtenberger, and I 2 thumbs up on that one. And I'd like to, if you ever get that appointment, you have to invite me. I hope you understand that.
Absolutely. It'd probably be you that introduces us in the first place, if the truth be known.
No, if you can get that, let me know. I'd love to. But also Nate Hagens, have you been looking at him? I've been posting his stuff on Globe Hackers Facebook, and he just had a conversation with Daniel Schmachtenberger. His second one, they're going to have many. So
my core belief here,
it's in my watch later.
Standard religion and economic growth for everyone.
So that's Daniel Schmachtenberger and Nate Hagens. I love Nate Hagens. He's such a nice guy, and his perspective is so good.
Yeah, and he just released that animated video or movie, which I found was really interesting, and shared it up on my community section of my page, and I've saved the Daniel interview into my watch later. It came up in my feed this afternoon. It's like, yep, I'll be putting aside some time for that.
Yeah, I want to make a sitting at the desk video about that, because what they're talking about encapsulates what I've been concerned with for so many years, 15 or more, maybe 18, 20 years, I don't know. And they're so eloquent, they understand the various ways things integrate together so well. And I just couldn't possibly do that. I'm not a professional communicator, and I don't get enough practice, to do that. But I think it all the time when I hear them talk. I'm thinking about books I've read, other people I've listened to over the years, courses I've taken, and it gives you that integral kind of perspective on the world, where you understand how everything fits together and influences everything that fits together. This kind of quality of things, in particular energy, since the mid 18th century, our use of energy and how that's changed everything, and how it's not sustainable, but that's another thing. So good. Yeah, that's one thing. If anybody's watching, find those podcast feeds and listen to them, because I think it's crucial, this point of view.
Yeah, and look, Nate's channel's on YouTube, so you don't have to go to a podcast on your phone or anything like that. You can put it in like I did, into the watch later, and listen to it in the car or something like that.
And if you're unfamiliar with the language or the discourse or some of the things they're referring to, because you have to be kind of broadly well-read to understand it, and a lot of my friends think it's kind of like, I don't get it, it's over their head. stick with it. Don't give up on it. Listen to it, follow the links, follow the subject matter that they're speaking of. Go to my page on Facebook or wherever. Find more links. You know, you can go to my website at globehackers.com. We have a lot of links there and books. It doesn't matter. Just keep at it, because pretty soon, very quickly, it'll start making sense to you, even if the vocabulary is over your head, or the rhetoric, or the, you know, the things they're referring to in terms of computational stuff, and, you know, self-terminating systems, and, you know, all these things that they constantly talk about, you know, how energy works, how energy and finance are interconnected. But it's not my job to regurgitate what they say so well. I just don't want you to give up on it if you're watching. Don't just shift away because it seems complicated.
Well, there's been quite a few of Nate's videos, his guests, that have really shone a light on how things work. And you don't have to, I found that, look, I've got very limited knowledge. Some of his guests explain it really well. You know, just fossil fuels and how it works and what's involved in that whole supply chain. And you know, but it's not an environment. I don't find his podcasts or anything to be preachy or anything. It's more of a, this is a fact. It's not trying to convince you of any political thing. It's just, this is where we're at, and this is what we've really got to think about. You know, over to you to get there, but we've got to do something, you know. And that, I think that's the message is lost too about it with energy. It's finite and we're running out.
Well, certain kinds of energy is finite.
Yeah,
we don't know about the universe and all the atoms and laws of thermodynamics and whatnot. But yeah, in fossil fuels, right? Get oil and gas,
and so forget you can park for a moment climate change and greenhouse gases. You can park that for a second. The reality is that we've got to find alternate energy sources, because you can't keep digging this shit out of the ground. And when you come to grips with that, and when you start developing alternative energy, the climate will actually start looking after itself, that issue. But I think that it's always been framed about the globe's warming, we've got to do something, and then people get into the weeds of, well, it's not actually warming, that's just, you know, and it's always been warming, and it's not man-made, and all this sort of crap. And that's just bullshit. It's all a smoke screen, so to speak, because we are running out of this stuff. And what are we going to do? And we're fighting wars over it, where people are starving because of it. And the rich are getting richer and the poor are not getting anywhere because of it, because it's a finite resource. And I think that's where the debate really needs to sort of get more attention.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much. So listen to those guys, because you and I will talk about one tiny little bit of it very poorly. Those guys are just awesome. And read their books and stuff. Well, Nate has a book, and there's a lot of other things they refer to, and just go down those pathways and to have a look and familiarize yourself. And then you can get away from the propaganda, the culture wars, the woke things, the politically correct things, and just focus on, you know, how the world works and what you can do to ensure that it keeps working, and that our situation as a global community improves, and also our situation as local communities can improve. The other thing I've been watching a lot lately is Aarvoll, who I think is a new right guy, but he's not a shallow new right guy. He's very deep. His philosophy is perennialism. That's the main focus, but he's a very, very well-read scholar of a lot of things. And he's very eloquent, and it's given me a chance to explore the new right a little bit in a more generous frame of mind, not the alt-right, not militia groups, but this idea where people are looking at preserving traditional cultures as something that's a good thing, that has utility and is a good thing. So I've been watching that too. I think it's interesting. And I'm starting to understand now much better why people are pissed off at liberals and neoliberals for trying to tell them to get with the program. You know, you be like me or get lost because you're an idiot, you know. And we're all tempted to say that people that don't think like us are idiots. They're not idiots. They have a different perspective, and some of them, you know, these alt-right, but not alt-right, but new right people have thought things through really deeply. I have issues with it only in terms of some details about how we have for centuries, but how moving forward we peacefully coexist with beautiful traditional societies, which I've always appreciated, whether it was Japan or Bali or Italy or wherever I am. And I, you know, but, you know, magical traditions aren't going to help us solve these energy problems that we're talking about. So there has to be an understanding of how we have the tools of science, we have better tools to use in science. They get better all the time. We go from simple telescopes to, you know, space telescopes, and we go from, you know, simple chemistry to Cas 19 or Cas whatever it is, the, you know, gene editing and all that kind of thing. We're learning all the time, and our technology gets better, supercomputing, AI, all that stuff. And it can all be used for good things if we understand the global aspect of it, how important science is, and how important our traditions are, and meaning making, not just sense making, but the meaning of life issues that are so crucial to people. So I think that's another thing to explore that I've been exploring. But I just wanted to ask you on this call, because we've been talking about, you know, the king thing, or if you were the boss, the CEO, or if you had a heck of a lot of power, more than Bezos and all those guys combined, you know, Gates and Bezos and whatever politician, or, you know, if you were a king, what would you do? But it's a big subject, so let's just pick one domain and talk about that. So pick one, could be anything: education, healthcare, energy, war, culture, whatever.
I think if I was, say, a monarch, so that I was at the apex of a political system, I would control that political system only by saying, you can't bullshit. You cannot lie in your discourse. In fact, I don't give a shit if it's political advertising. If you say something that's false, you're out, right? So we have a true exchange of ideas, because everything else flows from this. Everything else flows from it, right? You can't talk about energy. You can't talk about the economy. You can't talk about religion, transgender issues, science. You can't talk about any of that unless everyone agrees that they're not going to straw man, and they're not going to bullshit, and they're not going to gild any lilies, and they're not going to get offended, because it will be all good faith conversation. And the way I would do that as the monarch is, like I said, if you bullshit in Parliament, you don't just get a strike and I name the member for Higgins. It's like, no, disqualified.
Right.
You bullshitted to the Australian public.
Red
You
card.
lied.
Yeah, red
Red
card.
card, you're out. Not suspended, not suspended either. You are a politician, you are an officer of the crown, so to speak. You lied, you're out. No, and no comeback. So, because at the end of the day, these are the people that are making the decisions for all of us. And the debates, you look at the gun debate at the moment going on in the US, you look at the energy debates, climate change, all this sort of crap. No one's listening to each other. And they're all getting on their Fox News and their CNN and all this sort of crap and their YouTube channels, and they're preaching to their little converted and geeing everyone up as to why you need to hate those people that disagree with you, regardless of facts, regardless of, let's not let, and they don't let facts get in the way of their narrative, and they don't talk in good faith. And so, yeah, that's what I would do, is truth in politics.
I'll tell you what, I love that. And I would expand it. I would expand that to say in any leadership. So obviously, as a culture and the head of a culture, with divine rights or without divine rights, if you were just chosen in some semi-democratic way to be, like in terms of Moldbug or whatever, to be the CEO of the world or the country or whatever, one of your prime values that you would state in your manifesto or whatever, in your kingly guide, is that you have to be truthful. And I would say that every leader would be truthful, and that you'd have parents teaching their children to be truthful. And you'd have teachers who would say, you're suspended if you lie, and that kind of thing. Now, we're not talking about white lies and things that children do, or exaggerated stories that young people tell. We're talking about crucial issues, when you're talking about things that matter. You can't bullshit, you can't lie. So even though we have the tools like Carl Sagan's bullshit detector kit, and we have a lot of those things, and we have the ability to study heuristics and biases, we have the scientific method, and all kinds of great technologies that can help us with data crunching, understanding data, and so on. We would have to learn these tools and learn what makes truth, and learn what makes truthiness truthy, and learn what makes truthfulness truthful. And these would be prime, and there would be no going back. Like, daddy gets really mad when his teenage kid, bullshits or lies. It's like, just don't bullshit me. It's all good. We can work through it, but we have to be sincere and truthful. I would expand that on a cultural level. And then anybody who had responsibility for anything important, especially important, would be held to account very, very draconianly. So, when you screw up, if you're going with Nissan or one of these CEOs, if you're doing any kind of fraud, that puts you away for life. You don't get to pass go ever again.
Well, that would, I suppose that sort of touches on justice issues, whereas do we have an infinite punishment for a finite crime? But certainly, just that fraud bit, for instance, Audi and Volkswagen years ago fiddled the books on their emissions measurements. And look, they didn't get fined or punished the same way in every country. It's always amazing as an Australian. You see these lawsuits in America, $6 billion, and the same lawsuit for the same crime in Australia, $242,000.
Well, it depends, in terms of that, and that's just a drop in the bucket for those corporations. But yeah, I'm with you in the sense that it has to be considered really, really bad to lie and to commit fraud. Because I was just watching this thing about this Tinder kind of romance guy in Australia who was conning women out of money, kind of entertaining. And I was thinking, these guys, that's not even a crime. They can go on doing that forever. They'll never get busted, even if they're on like this other guy in Europe, even if they made a Netflix series out of him and he was back at it the minute he got out of jail in Israel, because, and this is wrong. I mean, if you're a CEO of a company and you allow people to get away with these kinds of lies that really go against your fiduciary responsibility and your responsibility to the commons, the community, to your customers, then you're out. I mean, you would be fired, and that would be it. It would be a huge red letter on scarlet letter for you for the rest of your life. And this would sort a lot of things out, because people would start to say, look, before I open my stupid mouth, before I do something stupid, I have to understand what's going on here to the best of my ability. So to some degree, you could plead ignorance, but you'd never be able to plead willful ignorance, right?
I think that touches on a point too. We've just had an election here in Australia, and it's always interesting, particularly during election times, but also anytime a politician is at a press conference and the press are looking for their gotcha moment. They're looking for, the little gaffe, the little slip up. So, at the end of the day, they're asking some unfair questions. I don't care what political persuasion you are. Every politician does get asked some unfair questions from time to time. So what that does is it breeds a situation where politicians and others have talking points. And so they just don't lie by just avoiding answering the actual question, or they speak off the cuff. And I think that your point there is that, as a leader, as a representative, as someone who has responsibilities, you need to say, I don't know, I will find out and I'll get back to you. And the press should say, thank you, that would be lovely. And they shouldn't just shoot off. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but let's face it, there is a shit ton of people voicing opinion devoid of any facts in the foundation of that opinion. And I'm happy for people to look at facts and go, well, this is how I interpret facts, and there's an agreed interpretation, and this is my opinion on what we should do about it. That's an opinion, and that's worthy. But my opinion that I've got off watching 2 YouTube videos versus the opinion of a 30-year expert in the field is, well, I'd have to have a bloody good argument, wouldn't I, to convince people otherwise. But I think that it's important that we do go back to starting to have an agreed set of facts. We've politicized truth. You're entitled to your own truth in many respects, and that's bullshit. I think that we should all search for the truth, and not everyone has all the truth. But
well, if you're talking about what's better, Orthodox Christianity or Catholicism or Buddhism, or what's closer to the truth, these things are fungible, and they're things that are context specific in terms of culture, experience, proclivities, sensitivities, attractions, repulsions. You can do your Jonathan Haidt thing on that. And also, there's nothing wrong with searching for meaning in astrology, or believing that by holding up your hand you can heal somebody or whatever. These things are different. when it has
gets
impact,
all-
when it has consequence and impact,
Mm.
when it kills people, you know, like what all the shenanigans that went on before the invasion of Ukraine, a lot of bullshit, propaganda, marketing, PR, you know, these kind of spin masters that are actually spinning tales or narratives that will get people in trouble, get people killed, help people starve to death, make people poorer, less healthy, and so on and so forth. So yeah, anything like that. You're a drug maker, you have a pharmaceutical company, you mess around with that, you're out, you're gone. You know, I don't know if we lop off your head or hang you, but you're gone. So yeah, I think that's profound and it's great. And also it encourages people to understand levels of truth, where truth comes from, how you can gauge and measure truth, how you can understand whether something's truthful or truth or not, like the difference between fact and fiction. You know, I mean, there are facts that one can find and experimentally, you know, confirm and so on and so forth. So, you know, these are the things. So if my friend wants to tell me about astrology, that's fine. And maybe I can learn something by thinking about my life, meaning of life in terms of that. And I don't have to just say it's bullshit. But on the other hand, I can understand what's required to prove a scientific fact, truth, right? And
well, just on that, you know what? The guy across the road that's trying to sell me his beaten up shitbox car and trying to tell me she runs like a dream, mate. That is not anywhere near as bad as a scientist manipulating data for a political agenda or only putting forward certain scientific evidence and not letting us see what the counter evidence is, you know, because it's pushing an agenda of some description. And I'm not going to name anything because I'm not talking about the politics of see that side lies and that side never lies. Bullshit. Because I've seen it happen with so many things that politicians, I'm hiding behind the science. The science says, well, the science says lots of things, but we notice that you only make certain decisions based on the science you like about the topics you like. So I think that for us to get our trust back into our institutions, we need to show that there is evidence of things, and this is what the evidence suggests and is pushing us towards, but we should use language like that. But we have scientists now talking in absolutes and politicians with an agenda using that to further an agenda. And without acknowledging gaps, without acknowledging shortcomings, what it does, it opens up for people to come through with the conspiracy theories, with the gotcha statistic. But if we take it even further back, it requires better education from a young age on how to discern fact from bullshit.
yeah, that's what I was going to say at some point, but I'm not going to do that today. We got 10 minutes left here on the free version. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about that today, but you know, yeah, education. I mean, it's huge. But yeah, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, you know, they have their issues, but you know, they can have their points of view, and maybe one's less honest than the other. That's totally different than what you're talking about. And that would eliminate a lot of corruption. That would eliminate a lot of expenses, unnecessary expenses, and so on. So that was good. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a core thing, and I hadn't really thought of it, you know, as a domain. But truth is a domain. It definitely is, you know. And maybe in the future we can talk about other specific things like healthcare, education, security, energy, things like that. And I encourage everybody who watches this to go out and look into those things and really question your ideas when it comes to truth. Don't take for granted what you're consuming as the basis of truth. You know, look into it. Look into it, you know.
Look, and people know my views on religion and things like that, and I accept and acknowledge that people find truths in parables and stories, and it gets really academic. For instance, was Jesus a real person? That gets academic. The teachings of Jesus, what does that really mean? What I'm very worried about is when people, you know, then weaponize religion, and create theocracies, or they strive for a theocracy, so that everyone must conform to a certain way of interpretation of a book. But yeah, it would be, you'd have to define, wouldn't have to define necessarily, but you'd have to agree on what is the type of truth we're talking about in a certain scenario. Is it factual truth, 1 + 1 = 2, or is it a philosophical or a moral or an ethical truth? And that's
Metaphysics, esoteric stuff, feelings, attractions, right? I mean, I like this book. You don't like it. There's no accounting for taste. You know, I never listened to the Beatles, mate. The Beatles are crap, mate. You know, if you want to go back that far, you might as well talk about Mott the Hoople.
Yeah. But that's it. I think that the foundation of everything is true, being good faith actor and coming to things in good faith. And look, where there is no knowledge, everything's on the table, and you can play with the numbers, and you can play with the data, and you can play with philosophy and everything. But you have to have good faith in the way you.
And that's another thing that informs this that we have to talk about, which all the people we love talk about all the time. But you know how the financial system impacts that, financial incentives and so on, and just the idea of what is currency, you know, what should money do and what should finance do and so on, because it really does, there are so many malincentives involved with it that it makes people liars, because they're lying just to get the money, because they need the money to do anything. And that's another thing I wanted just to briefly say, because this conversation will continue. I think it's a good frame for a conversation, but in terms of these kinds of corruptive elements, right? We are not paying any attention to it. We take it for granted. It's like, yeah, that's what we do. I want to play, so I have to cheat to win. You know, it's the tragedy of the commons, and the, you know, the problem with, you know, having finite resources that you fight over. I want to be in the club. I want my privileged position. I have to cheat to have it. The more money I get, the more power I have, the more I can influence people and to do what I want, even if it's not earnest, not truthful, if it's corrupt, if it's destructive. So it's a vicious cycle, that thing. And those incentives have to be sorted. So you really have to find your, I like what Moldbug talks about in terms of, you know, blockchain and whatnot. He's pretty switched on about that stuff. And, you know, you need to have a good store of value, what that means, a good sense of what a currency is, a good sense of what money is and the velocity and flow of that. And you have to rein that in. You can't have people constantly creating all these bullshit derivatives of everything, including ideologies, and then, you know, trading them and banding them about just to keep your career and your membership to the club, so that you can fuck all the rest of the people over. You know, it's not good.
Yeah, but I think that it's very easy to demonize people who get ahead and billionaires, and yes, they've probably lied and cheated along the way, inadvertently or directly, or on purpose, and all that sort of stuff. But we've also got to acknowledge there are some people that do nothing to help themselves and are just naturally sponges on everyone else. And I just saw something on TV. You know, we've had floods and all sorts of things. There's a lot of pressure at the moment on rental properties. The cost of housing is going up. The cost of rentals is going up, and some areas are finding rentals very sparse. And then, so what do? They bring on this 23-year-old woman with 5 kids, and the sob story about how she can't find housing. And it's like, okay, so you really didn't set yourself up for success here, did you? You didn't really put yourself in any way in a competitive position to get ahead. You know, when in this day and age, you have all sorts of forms of birth control and all that sort of stuff. But at the age of 23, you've had 5
That's
kids.
complicated because there's so many things that go into making somebody motivated and productive. And
yeah, so that's where you've got to, that's where sometimes the heart of it goes back further, and it comes down to that education piece and that truthness. It's like, well, a lot of people have been, we blame them for failure, but we actually set them up for failure through, and sometimes we set people up for failure because we meant well. Let's incentivize. Well, what was supposed to be a safety net can become an incentivization if you know how to game the system. What they think they're gaming the system, but what they're doing is actually keeping themselves down in the lower rungs of the system. So I suppose my point is, without picking on individual topics, is that we've got to also look at setting ourselves up in reality, setting ourselves up for success, as much as society setting us collectively up for success. There'll always be people who will go ahead of the pack. They're better, they're faster, they're stronger. Just if they've got good genes, you know, there will always be that person who works really hard, but it really did help that they inherited $6 million before they worked really hard. Yeah. And then there's those people who, despite the fact that they had, they arrived in a country as an immigrant refugee with $2 in their pocket, they became a millionaire in 10 years. There's always going to be those exceptional people.
Yeah, so I guess just I got about a minute here. So yeah, I guess that boils down. We can sign off by just urging our friends to not lie to themselves. Just be honest with yourself. That's a good place to start, because then you can say, wow, I need to work on something here. And maybe if I do, things will look up a bit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. And maybe you got to be honest to say, you know, I think I might have too much money. No one's ever said that. All right, buddy. Thanks a lot. Let's do it again sooner this time, okay? Good on you. Thanks, cheers, mate. See ya. All the best. Okay, bye-bye.